Today I'm going to be showing you the best build in Diablo 4. It's called the Lightning Spear Sorc, and it absolutely obliterates T8 Infernal Hordes and really any content that you do. It is an incredibly powerful build, so let's go ahead and hop on into it. So you're going to need a Fractured Winterglass to play this. If you do not have this, you should go play Firewall or Fireball Sorc. Those would be my recommendations. For leveling, Firewall is really good because it requires very, very little gear, so it'll give you a solid way to farm this. You get this off of Lord Zir. So the reason why this is so good is for really 3 reasons. So it says casting Frozen Orb has a 65% chance to spawn a random conjuration when it explodes. Now the when it explodes part is kind of the key detail there. And then you have cooldowns are reduced by 0.4 seconds when a frozen orb explodes, or conjuration cooldowns that is. And then you get +9 to your conjuration mastery. So if you come over here to the frozen orbit band, this is going to make your frozen orb explode 2 additional times. So that means you have 2, because this specifically states when it explodes, you now have 2 additional times that you're going to be able to spawn a potential conjuration skill. Not to mention, because it blows up 2 additional times, you also proc the conjuration cooldowns thing 2 additional times because the frozen orb is exploded. So really this 0.4 is more like, 1.2 second cooldown whenever a frozen orb explodes. So as you start spamming frozen orbs, all of a sudden your conjuration skill cooldowns just go astronomically down. Okay, but there's more. So we know that's why we spawn so many conjurations, but if you come over to this conjuration mastery, you gain 12% damage, 12% move speed, and 24% mana regeneration for each active conjuration. This is why you don't run out of mana, even though you're spawning all of these different lightning spears and you're also sending out all these different frozen orbs. It's because you'll get up to where you could have 16, 30. Now it's going to depend on your gearing, how many you can get out and where you're at with your build. But if you have really top end gear, you could get somewhere along the lines of 30 to 40 of these out. So think about how much damage that is, because this is not capped. So you just get so much damage. You could be getting easily 200, 300% damage out of this thing whenever there's a lot of enemies. And with Lightning Spear, because you get so much so much cooldown from this, and then you can also stack things like cooldown on your helm. And then you also get things like cooldown from Tal Rasha's. And then if you get a Harlequin Crest, you get 54% cooldown reduction. And then you can also put Lightning Spear cooldown reduction on your ring. Now all of a sudden you're able to get this down. I think my Lightning Spear currently, and I have a Harlequin Crest and stuff like that, but I don't even have fully Masterwork gear, is down to 8 seconds. So all I have to do is throw out a few frozen orbs, and I am pressing this virtually every second. It's crazy how fast that I'm able to do this. So you just keep throwing out lightning spears, and keep in mind it says when it explodes, it doesn't say it has to hit an enemy. It doesn't say anything like that. It just has to explode. So, and then on top of that, your conjurations have a 90% chance to launch a frozen orb at nearby enemies, so then you get even more frozen orbs. And that's why this build ultimately is so crazy. It's really just if you really wanted to balance this build, all you have to do is put a cap on conjuration mastery. But will they do it? I don't know. Should they do it? Hell, I don't know. I mean, this build's just absolutely insane, and in its own league. I was able to do, T7s before I even hit level 100 with this build. So, yeah, keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and hop on into the other skills now that you understand how the build works. So I have here a standard build, and then I have one with Uber Uniques. Like I said, I don't recommend playing this build until you get a Fractured Winterglass. I wouldn't try to make this build work until you have a few of the pieces. You're just better off playing Fireball or Firewall Sorc for that case. All right, so if you don't have a whole lot of gear yet and you still need to farm up a bunch of gear. So that being said, on the helmet, we have Aspect of Concentration, so casting Conjuration skill is going to give you 25% damage reduction for 5 seconds. You want Lightning Spear, cooldown reduction, max life, lightning spear, lucky hit chance. On this, you are going to want the snow veiled aspect. This is going to make your ice armor give you unstoppable and also grant you 25% damage reduction. You're actually going to reset your ice armor and lower its cooldown by quite a lot too as you stack cooldown reductions. You'll actually be able to activate this a lot, and the extra unstoppable is very, very nice. You're going to want armor, max life, all resistance, percent armor, and lightning spear. You can get all the armor that you need from just this one item, but you're going to need good armor rolls. If you did get the Fractured Winter Glass and you're still leveling up, and let's say you're like level 75 or something, you can swap out the max life on here, or you could even swap out the Lightning Spear if you haven't found a Lightning Spear one for armor to make up your armor. And the same thing goes with All Resist, but All Resist typically is easier to get on a Sorcerer since your main stat is Int, and Int gives you All Resist. Throw max life gems in all of your defensive gear. So the gloves, we're going to be using Conceited Aspect. You get a barrier every time you use a defensive skill because of a passive we take in the skill tree. So then you'll have access to 25% increased damage. You're going to want attack speed, critical strike chance, critical strike damage, and then lightning spear, lucky hit chance. We focus on critical strike damage because while it is additive damage, it's additive damage for a separate multiplier. So it does still end up being pretty darn solid. On top of that, when you add things like spirit and stuff like that to it, it becomes pretty good. Tybalt's Will. Now you deal 20% increased damage while unstoppable and for 5 seconds after. So whenever you activate ice armor, you'll proc this. It'll give you 50 of your resource back. I don't recall if Flame Shield just makes you immune or if immune it counts as unstoppable, but I do know that your teleport does make you unstoppable whenever you teleport. So ice armor and teleport, I know for a fact do that. I don't think the immune is technically counts as unstoppable. So, but you get 20% damage, and then you want to put your greater affixes onto the damage reduction while unstoppable here because it's really, really solid. Alternatively, you can put on max life or resource. Really, you get so much defense in this build that normally, and you'll see in my Paragon, I literally just go for a bunch of glyphs. I just go for a ton of glyphs. This build is just so because you stun everything, you just don't need as much defense. You're just stunning everything all the time with Lightning Spear. It's crazy. This is kind of the best offense or best defense is a good offense type of build. But still, I think the 40% damage reduction while unstoppable is still useful in the event something does get close to you. So that is what I would do. Also, if I didn't say it before, cooldown on the helmets, and then max life here, and then you want to go with critical strike chance here. The reason why you want critical strike chance is because we're going to be using Isu's Heirloom, which is the next item, and this is going to give you movement speed, and it's going to give you a bunch of extra critical strike chance based on your movement speed. Now, you need to remember that what do we gain from Conjuration Mastery? Well, we gain a bunch of movement speed. So that means it's very easy to go ahead and hit the cap on this. I masterwork the movement speed on this just to have some extra movement speed. However, alternatively, if you were to roll critical strike damage, that's not bad as well because you do get a ton of movement speed from Conjuration Mastery. So personally, I think either of those are fine. But yeah, and then you also do get some all resistance from this, so this is going to help you out a lot too with getting to your resistance cap. But you will need about, I want to say 40%. You want 40 to 45% crit chance. And then this is going to bring you up to 85%. So, yeah, pretty solid. All right, moving on to the staff. So critical hits with Lightning Spear are going to cause lightning to arc from it, dealing 4,800 damage to the target and up to 5 other enemies. And this is increased by your critical strike damage bonus. So this is another reason why we stack critical strike damage bonus, is because you can actually scale Lightning Spear damage, or this aspect specifically with it. And because you're casting so many Lightning Spears, you'll see, but you should see in the gameplay I have going alongside here, sometimes you'll just start hitting things so much it's hard to even see what's happening. It's you're just rapid fire hitting them all the time. So we're really solid. You're going to want intelligence, max life, critical strike damage again, and then a chance for a second Lightning Spear when cast. I will say this, until you have this second chance for Lightning Spear cast and you have good cooldown on this Fractured Winter Glass and you have it masterworked, you're not going to get out the most insane amount, but once you masterwork this and you have kind of everything, all your stats kind of lined out, that's when you start hitting the 30s, 40s, etc. Stuff like that with getting your conjurations out. So, all right, moving on, we have the Fractured Winter Glass. Oh, and you're going to want to go ahead and put your Masterworks into Intelligence, or alternatively, you could also put them into Crit since it does scale Lightning Spear. Then you're going with the Fractured Winter Glass, a chance for Frozen Orb projectiles to cast twice, so that's really solid. Non-physical damage. Cooldowns are reduced by 0.4 seconds when a Frozen Orb explodes. So then, also factor in if you do end up proccing that Frozen Orb twice ability, you'll end up getting even more cooldown reduction because those are also going to explode 2 additional times for a total of like 3 times. And then you have +9 to Conjuration Mastery, which is just giving us a ton of extra damage here because you can see here it's only 1%. Like, it doesn't seem crazy until you get something like this that buffs it up to 10%, and all of a sudden you're just getting a wild amount of damage, right? All right. Then, again, casting Frozen Orb has a 65% chance to spawn an Conjuration when it explodes, and then your Conjurations have up to a 90% chance to launch a Frozen Orb at nearby allies. So, absolutely crazy unique. I imagine Conjuration Mastery will eventually get capped, but I don't know. They might leave it like this because they have it at 1%, so they might just end up nerfing the Conjuration Mastery thing just to reduce this build's damage. I don't know. But attack speed, crit chance. Oh, and then you're going to want it on Conjuration Mastery just because that's going to give you a ton of damage per stack. Or alternatively, I know mine, if you do land it on the cooldown, that one's not bad, especially early on, because you won't need all that damage to kill stuff early on if you're like level 75 or something like that. So hitting the cooldown one just so you can just get more lightning spears out is also not bad. Personally, I'm not very picky when it comes to masterworking, so if I was to hit, like, let's say 1 on the cooldown and then 2 on Conjuration Mastery, I would call that good. But technically, if you want the most possible damage, I believe you want this on Conjuration Mastery. So Band of Frozen Orbit, making your Frozen Orbs explode 2 additional times for 60% of its damage. Doesn't really matter how much damage it does, but we just want the double explosion effect. Attack speed, crit chance, critical strike damage again. And the reason why we keep doing the Masterworks on crit chance again is for in combination with Isu's Heirloom to make sure we can have a nice high critical strike chance. So whenever we do get this up to max, we're close to 100% crit. Now we want Tal Rasha's Iridescent Loop. So for each type of elemental damage you deal, gain 20% damage. So we deal with Frozen Orb is how we deal our cold damage. Then we easily have the lightning damage, and then we actually have the Firebolt enchantment on, and that's going to give you your fire damage in order to proc this, and then you're able to get up to 80% more damage with this. This is a pretty goated ring. It also gives you a lot of cooldown reduction. I think it's used in almost every single Sorcerer build. I don't see why it wouldn't be. It's just that good. And then for enchantments, again, we use Firebolt and then Ice Blades. This is just so for every 40 seconds in cooldowns you spend, you spawn an Ice Blades on a random enemy. So it's going to make enemies vulnerable. It also gives 20% of its cooldown reduction to your other skills. So it gives you even more cooldown reduction for Lightning Spear. So now if we just hop on over into the skill tree. The skill tree, there's not a lot of room for variation. You kind of need all the stuff. There's really, at least from what I've seen, it really seems like there's only one way to run this build. I looked around to see if there's anything I could do to tweak it, maybe get a little more damage, but I really just don't see anything that could be necessarily like improved upon. It seems like this is kind of a very straightforward build. So 2 into Firebolt, take that just so we can get the Firebolt enchantment. Frozen Orb just so we can use it to proc it. We don't need anything here. We don't care about this. We have plenty of ways to make things vulnerable. We don't need to take this. Charged Bolts, we use this because we take Unstable Currents. Unstable Currents is going to make random skills cast, and whenever this hits an enemy, it's going to reduce their damage dealt by 25%, so it makes it to where your Unstable Currents also becomes kind of a defensive ability, which is another reason why you just take such little damage when you're doing this because everything's stunned, etc. You come down here, we take Flame Shield because, I mean, it's just a free immune. Really, really good. We don't really care about any of this. It doesn't really do anything for us. We don't care about the burn. We don't, like, none of this stuff really matters. Teleport, and then after we teleport, we get 30% damage reduction. But because we end up getting, a bunch of cooldown to our abilities, we actually end up teleporting a lot, so we can keep Shimmering Teleport up a lot, so it's just another 30% damage reduction. And we don't really benefit from Teleport doing damage, we don't care about that. And then if you look here, while we put 2 points into it, so you can see, like, it goes down by quite a lot by putting the points. So we have, like, 2 extra points. If you don't want to put them here, I would put them into Elemental Attunement. But Critical Strikes have up to a 7% chance to reset the cooldown of your defensive skills. And then you have Glass Cannon, 18% increased damage, but you take 6% more damage. And then we have Ice Armor, Enhanced Ice Armor and Shimmering gives you 30% increased mana regen while it's active, and then you reduce its cooldown by 1 second for every 50 mana you spend, which we spend a lot of mana because we are spamming Frozen Orb. Alright, Precision Magic to increase our lucky hit, align the elements so we get damage reduction against elites, and then we have Mana Shield. Every time you spend 100 mana, gain 30% damage reduction. And then you have Protection. Using a cooldown grants 30% of your max life as a barrier. This is how we are able to keep Conceited up so much, because we will have a barrier a lot, and it also helps deal with poison. When we have Ice Blades, Enhanced Ice Blades, and Summoned Ice Blades, we go ahead and take this because we will be spawning them for every 40 seconds in cooldowns you spend. So, which is going to be quite frequent because we have a ton of cooldown reduction, and we're going to be constantly pressing abilities. So, yeah, and it gives us a nice way to make things vulnerable, as well as giving things more CDR. Then we have Lightning Spear. So casting a Lightning Spear spawns additional Lightning Spear and increases our critical strike chance by 15%. So that means just by casting this, we're already going to be getting 2 stacks of Conjuration Mastery for each one we cast. And we have Lightning Spear stuns enemies for 2 seconds. So collecting Crackling Energy increases the damage of your next Lightning Spear. So this one isn't that good, because it says your next Lightning Spear, not all Lightning Spears. So like if it was a buff that said by picking up Crackling Energy, your Lightning Spears now do X increased damage for 5 seconds, that would be pretty good. But since it just says specifically your next one, that means you'd have to cast it, go pick up more Crackling Energy, so it's really not that great, whereas this is just perma-stunning everything all the time, which is a fantastic form of defense. 3 points into Conjuration Mastery. Coming down here, Icy Veil to make our barriers have 24% increased duration. This will help with, I believe, Flame Shield and Ice Armor. Actually, I don't know if this affects Flame Shield. This doesn't give us a barrier technically, it just makes us immune. So it will help you with Ice Armor, and it will help you with any barrier that you get from the protection. So I guess in that way it does, but yeah. And then Static Discharge, Critical Strikes is going to form Crackling Energy. We mainly pick up Crackling Energy because we have a Paragon Glyph that gives us increased damage wall every time we pick it up. And then we have Unstable Currents, Enhanced Unstable Currents, so your attack speed gets increased by 25%. And then while Unstable Currents is active, you pulse Crackling Energy for free at 25% faster rate. So pretty solid overall. I mean, it's an attack speed steroid, and it helps us cast even more conjurations, because notice it says random conjuration core or mastery shock skill, so it will also cast more Lightning Spears and charge bolts. And then enemies deal 18% less damage for 5 seconds after being critically struck by your shock skills. And then we have Overflowing Energy. Crackling Energy hits 1 additional enemy. Each time Crackling Energy hits an enemy, your shock skills cooldowns are reduced by 0.1 seconds, increased to 0.35 seconds against elites. So this is just another way to get even more cooldown reduction. But yeah, so then you have Veer's Mastery. When you critically strike an enemy with a shock skill, you become charged and take 25% less damage. So you don't really care about this. And then Critical Strikes have a 10% chance to cause damage to arc as lightning. Like this, we also really don't care about this either. This isn't really going to do all that much. It'd be pretty good if we needed damage reduction, but overall, Overflowing Energy is going to be better. All right, so that's it for the gear and the skills. Let's hop on into the Paragon. Alright, so let's go ahead and hop on into the Paragon here. So I have pretty much ignored getting a whole lot of defense. I do get some defense if it's really easy to get to and it's beneficial. Like for example, I have it right here with Tactician, because if you use a rare node, it'll buff it to give you like 22% damage reduction from burning enemies, which we do get from the Firebolt enchantment. Yeah, so stuff like that. But if it's not super easy to get, I don't take it. And keep in mind, you do have like 9 flex points in this, so you can actually move it to, like, if you need some all resistance, you can move it to like right here, etc., etc. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop on into it. So we want Elementalist first. So Paragon nodes within range gain 75% bonus to their non-physical damage and damage reduction modifiers. So we're getting a bunch of non-physical bonus here. And then on top of that, this works as like Tal Rasha's, where you get up to 15% damage whenever you deal fire, cold, or lightning damage. So it's just a 15% damage boost. Moving up here into Burning Instinct, we can get Tactician. So you're going to deal 10% increased damage for 4 seconds after casting a defensive skill. The duration is increased by 4 seconds for each defensive skill not on your action bar. And the reason why we put this one here is because it gives us a bonus to Smoldering Embers, so we get more damage reduction from burning enemies. Then we come over here and we pick up damage reduction from elites because it's just right on the way. Then we are going to come up to Enchantment Master, This is going to give us charge. So for every 5 intelligence purchased within range, crackling energy is going to deal more damage. That's not really what we care about. What we care about is picking up crackling energy grants you 5% increased damage up to 15%. So you get another 15% damage modifier. And that's the big theme you're going to notice with Sorc builds in general, is even though they have stuff like this, generally speaking, going to a glyph slot for sorcerers is better because what they have is probably going to give you a percent multiplicative damage buff instead of additive. All right, so we pick up that, and then we come down here. This is going to be your flex points. You can take a bunch of these out and then put it somewhere else if you need like all resist or something like that to help fill out something as you're leveling up. And then we're going to come over here to Frigid Fate. We are going to want Unleash. So grants 150% bonus to all magic nodes within range. After spending 50 mana, you deal 8% increased damage and gain 25% increased mana regeneration for 3 seconds. So this just gives us even more mana regen. It gives us a little bit of a bonus to vulnerable damage. This one, I would honestly say, is probably the one you can swap out if you are wanting something else. So you have something like Invocation. So for every 5 dexterity purchase within range, your conjuration skills gain 27.7% critical strike damage, and it also gives you a damage reduction buff. So you could potentially use this one as well since you are using conjuration skills. But overall, this one's still pretty solid. But that is definitely the one that I think is, if you want to swap one out for something else, I think that one is the one that is probably going to be the one you can actually tech in and out of the build. Okay, so you have Frigid Fate. You deal bonus damage to vulnerable enemies equal to 20% of the total amount of the bonus damage with cold, up to a max 60%. So yeah, just getting a bonus damage to vulnerable enemies. Enemies are going to be vulnerable all the time. So we have a bunch of cold damage bonus, so it's all good and is pretty solid. Because you also have to remember, I believe the non-physical damage factors into this. So whenever you get like non-physical damage and stuff like that, I do believe that actually factors into that. So we come down here to Conjurer. So for every 5 intelligence within range, conjuration skills gain 50% increased damage. Conjuration skills have 20% increased duration. That's the reason really why we take it, is to make our lightning spears last even longer. We have Elemental Summoner. Your conjuration skills have a 10% reduced cooldown and or mana cost. They also deal bonus damage equal to 10% of the total amount of your bonus damage with fire, lightning, and cold. So again, another 60% damage buff here. So really, really good. And also, again, if you need more all resist, there's also some all resist right here you can go pick up as well. All right, with those flex points if you're leveling up. All right, so then we're going to come up here to Ceaseless Conduit. So this one is where we get Destruction. Critical strikes are going to increase the damage by up to, again, 12% multiplicatively. You're going to get a bunch of critical strike damage, which is then going to scale up your Splintering Energy Staff. Pretty darn solid. Come down here just to max out the dex, and then you'll get percent bonus of lightning damage, which is going to help you with your elemental summoner and stuff like that. Then we come over here to exploit, so dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy. Again, it's going to give you what? A 10% multiplicative damage buff. So it's like it's really hard to want to like path to any of this stuff unless you're trying to just like fill out getting your elemental summoner. If for some reason you're still lower level and you don't have that maxed out yet, like it's just hard to want to justify going to any of this because you can just continually get multiplicative damage multipliers. And then lastly, we're going to come down here to Flame Feeder, and we are going to pick up the Flame Feeder glyph. For every 5 dexterity purchase, you deal more damage to burning enemies, which we burn enemies with firebolts. And we also get 10% increased direct damage to burning enemies. So again, another 10% multiplicative damage buff that we can utilize. So we use 8 glyphs in this build in total. My gosh, my mouse is going crazy. But yeah, that is the Paragon board for the build. And again, you guys do have some flex spots here. You can take these, you can move them over. You can also swap out Unleash for more damage or more damage reduction. Personally, I am a fan of Invocation if you are going to swap it. So if you're feeling like you're just a little squishy and you don't have things going on yet, Invocation can be really good because it will give you a bunch of damage reduction. The main downside, obviously, is that you're not getting a multiplicative damage multiplier, and eventually you won't really necessarily need that damage reduction. But yeah. But anyways, guys, that's going to do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the Lightning Spear build. This is the most popular build of the season. So thanks for watching, guys. Like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you next time. Thanks.